Welcome to GV247.tv, the Global Vision Channel, a non-profit web TV channel bringing biblical perspective to the world in which you live.
Hello and welcome to this week's Channel 1 weekend programme, and today is a special, and I have a special guest with me in the studio who has actually been on before. Her name is Tricia from a group called CAMERA, and before I pass it over to her, I would just like to say we are addressing the situation in Israel, in the Middle East, in this programme. And we do ask that you would watch it prayerfully and take on board what's being told here. When you hear who Tricia is and what she deals with, you'll understand. So Tricia, I'd just like to hand over to you. Thank you so much again for your time. Thank you for being with us. So, and it's lovely to have you back again. So Tricia, could you just tell the viewers what your organisation, CAMERA, is all about?
Thank you, Deborah. It's good to be here again. It's good to see you again. As Deborah said, I'm Tricia Miller. I work for CAMERA, and that is an acronym. It stands for the Committee for Accuracy in Middle East Reporting and Analysis. It's a media watch organization that was started in response to the news coverage of the First Lebanese War. So CAMERA has been doing this for over 40 years, monitoring the media about everything in relation to Israel. We monitor all the English, Hebrew, Arabic, and Spanish media in the world. And I, as a Christian, I'm the director of CAMERA's Partnership of Christians and Jews. So I monitor everything going on in the Christian world in relation to Israel.
So we have had the atrocity that began on that Saturday, that Shabbat, Saturday, 7th October. How has this changed your working day, Tricia?
There really isn't any such thing as just a working day anymore. All of us at CAMERA, we're on war footing. It's around the clock. There is so much in the media that is inaccurate, that is biased. Some of it plain lies, such as last week that Israel bombed a hospital when in fact it didn't. But all the news media is just quick to pick up on that. That's just one example of thousands of where the media in general is eager to report anything that demonizes Israel and doesn't tell about what's actually happening on the ground. So it's been around the clock monitoring and responding and correcting.
What's your biggest challenge at the moment, Tricia?
My biggest challenge personally, as a Christian who has always focused on reaching the church, but evangelicals in particular, is to help Christians understand what's going on, because unfortunately there's many in the church who also don't understand and who are ready or willing to believe the lies. They're more willing to believe what Hamas says, the terrorist organization that carried out this horrible bloody, gruesome massacre. They're more ready to believe that than what Israel says.
Here in Scotland, where we are based, for example, although we are literally worldwide, there is such a strong pro-Palestinian movement. And in fact, our First Minister, our Prime Minister, as it were, his mother-in-law is in Gaza right now. And we're told to pray for our leaders. And as part of an intercessory prayer group, we were praying for him. We were praying for his wife and the parents and so on and so forth who are caught up in it. Now, we have a situation here, though, where there's one thing being pro-Palestinian and another being anti-Israel. There's a situation where you can be anti-Israel and you say, but I'm not an anti-Semite. It's not antisemitism. We're dealing, so much is semantics. There's a word for you, semantics, Shem. But where we're coming from here now is we're talking about a terrorist organization. Now, this is what people are not getting through their heads. When it was called ISIL or ISIS, it was much, much easier to deal with because you were able to see the beheadings. You were able to see the way they treated Christians or Jews on video. This, because they say they're doing it in the name of the Palestinians, is causing a confusion. Would you please explain the difference?
First of all, let me say there's no difference between Hamas and ISIS, and they are now Israel is saying that. There is no difference Even the captured terrorists are saying that, yes, we behaved like ISIS. They did horrible things and they recorded it. They were wearing cameras. This is recorded by Hamas themselves, the atrocities, which hopefully people have heard about. I don't know how much detail we want to go into on that. But Israel just released a 45-minute video compiling a lot of these videos and showed that a lot of the individual videos taken by Hamas and some by Israelis who were there, capturing things as things were happening. They compiled 45 minutes worth of this to show it to journalists, because already the world is denying that these atrocities happen. Already, like we have seen Holocaust denial, they're denying, the world wants to deny that this happened. And so then you asked about the difference between Hamas and the Palestinian people. Many of the Palestinians who live in Gaza support Hamas. There's obviously a lot who don't, but there are many supporters. They got elected. The majority of the people who live in Gaza voted for Hamas, and they support their efforts. And the day before, so I'm not condemning all the Palestinian people. I'm just saying it's very hard to differentiate between those who support Hamas and those who don't. It's unclear, but we know it's a majority who supports Hamas. The day before this invasion, there were thousands of people, residents from Gaza, demonstrating at that border fence. And what it was a cover. They were identifying the weak points in the fence for them to go through the next morning, and they were planting explosives. So there's civilian complicity in this. Not all of them, but there's civilian complicity.
There's also talk of the West Bank, where the Palestinian Authority is. Again, would you just explain a beginner's explanation? What is it all about? Thank you.
The Palestinian Authority is a separate governing body, separate from Hamas, but the president is Abbas, who was elected for a 4-year term many, many years ago, and there's never been another election. He has made statements. He supports what Hamas did. And part of the reason for Israel being caught off guard on October 7th is that there was a lot going on in the West Bank. And so there were diversions being created. Israel was more focused on Lebanon and the West Bank. They were actually deceived by Hamas being peaceful for a while and not doing anything. So the West Bank, the Palestinian Authority, played a role in this as well, by there being unrest and having Israel focused on them. And then after the atrocities, President Abbas of the Palestinian Authority has congratulated them, has said that what they did was right.
Explain about Hezbollah, because that's the third group whose name comes into this, again, just for those who have no idea about what's really going on.
Hezbollah is the terrorist organization who really does run Lebanon, even though they're not elected. And the Lebanese populace does not like them. They suffer just as much under Hezbollah, just like, you mentioned civilians do suffer under Hamas and under Palestinian Authority. Civilians also suffer under Hezbollah. But they are the terrorist organization on the northern border of Israel. They too have started firing rockets and mortars. Israel has had to evacuate dozens of communities in the north to get them out of the range of these rockets from the north. And of course, they've evacuated the communities in the south. So Hezbollah has the same intent as Hamas, which is to destroy Israel. Both of their charters, the PLO's charter, all of their charters state it for anyone to read. They exist for the purpose of destroying Israel. So in that, they're united. They just happen to be different organizations. However, the other thing they have in common is they are all funded and directed by Iran. So Iran is really the one source behind all of this.
A brief potted history of the people group that we call the Palestinians, if you don't mind, if you could do that in a few minutes.
First of all, there has never been a country called Palestine. It is a geographical designation that the Romans gave it in the first century, second century, after the Jews revolted. The first and second centuries, there were several revolts against the Roman occupation. The Romans defeated them, of course, because they were a whole lot more powerful than the Jews. And they expelled Jews from the land. They desecrated before destroying the temple, they had already desecrated it. Okay, so then they renamed the land. When Jesus was alive, walking on the earth, it was called Judea. It was Judea and Samaria. The reason we call the people who lived there Jews is because they're from Judea. That's the biblical term for the land, right? But when the Romans put down the revolts, kicked out the Jews, many of them, not all of them, but leaders, they kicked them out. They renamed the land Palestine. And what the Romans were doing was making a play on the word Philistines, because they wanted to just, it was just another way to just rub salt in the wounds for the Jewish people, to name their land Palestine. So it's only been a geographical designation. And before Yasser Arafat, who was leading the PLO in the 1960s, before the 1960s, that the Arabs who lived there did not want to be called Palestinians. They were proud of their Arab identity. They are Arabs. Anyone who is called Palestinian now they are Arabs in their ancestry. But Yasser Arafat recognized in the 1960s, oh, this is a great tool to use against Israel. Let's change our name. We'll call ourselves Palestinians. Say that we're the indigenous people of the land. We're the ones identified with this land. So it's a constructed identity. They are Arabs who decided in the 60s, for political purposes and for the sake of their propaganda, to call themselves Palestinians.
So where did they come from?
Many of them are Jordanian. They have Jordanian roots. Yasser Arafat himself was Egyptian. So many of them are Jordanians, though, but the Jordanians don't want them. The Arab nations use these people as a pawn. They don't care about them either. They won't let them in. They already have said they won't allow any refugees from Gaza. Israel has told Gazan civilians to evacuate because they're going to do a lot of damage to take out Hamas. They've told the civilians to evacuate, and Egypt won't take them. Jordan won't take them. Nobody wants them. They're being used as political pawns in their propaganda war against Israel.
So you've mentioned Iran, because this is the thing that I think a lot of people need to get their heads around in the vernacular, is who's behind these organizations, Hamas, Hezbollah. Now, Iran is just one nation. So we've had the so-called peace accords signed over the last few years. And of course, we have oil as well. I mean, there is a whole lot involved in here. But before we just speak about Iran, who can Iran call on as an ally? And we're going to have to come back to see what the Bible says and where the Christians should be in all of this. All right. So this is why, dear viewer, this is really major. If you don't know anything about eschatology, study of the end times, particularly biblical eschatology, please do get in touch with us. We have a number of programs on this channel. We are not conspiracy theorists. We do not look out with the Bible. We're looking at just straight scripture here, where Jesus says very, very clearly what the signs of the latter days will be. And we all know wars and rumors and wars. Now, let's stop playing about. There's been wars and rumors of wars for 2,000 years, but he also starts to give other signs. And some of us here have very strong opinions on where we are in this time clock. And the reason I'm saying this is that there's never been quite a point of conflagration as there is right now. And the potential, some people call it Armageddon. Well, again, you're using a biblical term, which is not strictly accurate, but we have the potential for World War III. Now, we've also, just before we move on, we've also done several programs about how Christians should be in this time, before it even happened. and having our eyes on the Lord and not fearing and all of these things. But we're grown-ups here. So we're going to be looking at some more of these grown-up challenges, the adult challenges that we have living in this world, even though we're not of it. So we do have potential for something absolutely massive happening. But remember, it's there in the scriptures. We're warned that these things can happen and they will get a lot worse before the Lord returns. All right. Let's just take another step back in time. Why Iran? Could you tell us a little bit of the history of Iran, Persia? And let's start to look at what the Bible says.
I will answer your question, but I wanted to point out what the word Hamas means. Hamas it's an acronym in Arabic for the name of the organization. They call it themselves the Islamic Resistance Movement. Okay, there's no secret about the fact they're militant Islamists, and they are doing this for Allah, and they believe they're supposed to conquer the entire earth. By the way, the Jews are only the first. I mean, they intend to conquer all infidels, which includes us, anyone who won't go along with the Islamic creed. Okay, but in Hebrew, the word Hamas means violence. It means violence, and it first appears in Genesis 6:13. In the days of Noah, God saw the earth was filled with violence. In Hebrew, that word is Hamas, and he sent the flood. And this word Hamas appears in the Bible 67 times. 67 times. So just as part of the history there, okay, what we're dealing with is an organization that is full of violence, and we've just seen that demonstrated. Okay, so back to Iran, the name of this country was Persia. It's just these radical Islamists who changed it to Iran. It's ancient Persia. It's the same territory that the story of Esther takes place in, where Esther and Mordecai and other exiles were there after the Babylonian captivity.
From the day Joshua entered the land of Canaan, the Israelites engaged in many bloody conflicts up to the reign of King David's son Solomon, where the nation experienced a period of relative calm in the region. After the death of Solomon around 931 BC, the 12 tribes of Israel would break into two kingdoms. Israel under the rule of Jeroboam I, comprising 10 tribes located in the north, with Samaria as its capital, while Judah under the rule of Rehoboam with 2 tribes was located in the south, with Jerusalem as its capital. After a succession of kings who did not walk in the way of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and held to detestable practices, even child sacrifice, prophets such as Isaiah foretold of impending judgment for Israel. In 722 BC, the Assyrian army captured the kingdom of Israel and exiled its people to Halah in Gozan. In 586 BC, the Babylonian army captured the kingdom of Judah, destroyed Solomon's temple, and exiled the people to Babylon for 70 years, as foretold by the prophet Jeremiah. Around 539 BC, the Babylonian Empire fell to the Achaemenid Empire, who in time would allow Jews to return home to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem, as described in the books of Ezra and Nehemiah, and to construct a second temple. In 332 BC, Alexander the Great overthrew the Persian coalition, yet the untimely death of a young Alexander would soon see the breakup of the Greek Empire among his generals. Conflict was never far from the Jewish people, which gave rise to the time of the Maccabees and revolt. One of the most notable events of that period was that of the desecration of the Jewish temple of Zerubbabel, where the Seleucid king Antiochus Epiphanes sacrificed pigs on the sacred altar in honor of the Greek god Zeus. In 63 BC, the mighty Roman Empire, under the leadership of General Pompey, took control of Samaria and Judea. In 40 BC, the Edomite Arab Herod the Great was appointed the title King of the Jews by the Roman Senate, and would be responsible for the development of the magnificent Herodian temple. little knowing that it would be razed to the ground only a few years after its final completion. As foretold by Micah the prophet, the Messiah would be born in Bethlehem of Judea.
In the story of Esther and Mordecai, their genealogies are emphasized. Esther and Mordecai are of the tribe of Benjamin. Haman, the guy who constructed the edict to get rid of all the Jews, he is identified as an Agagite. That means he's descended from King Agag, or Agag in the Hebrew, who was an Amalekite. All right, so in order to understand what's going on, you have to know the history between the Israelites and the Amalekites, the biblical history, because otherwise the story doesn't really make sense in Esther. Okay, the story, when you read the story, okay, Haman got insulted, got furious because Mordecai wouldn't bow to him. And he had been appointed to be this high official and everybody was supposed to bow to him and Mordecai would not bow. Well, Haman is so enraged that Mordecai won't bow that he decides he's going to not just take care of Mordecai. That's where he comes up with the ideas. He's going to have the entire Jewish race wiped out in all of Persia. In those days, in that time period, the Persian Empire was pretty much all of the known world. All right, it included the entire known world, including the land of Israel. So what Haman wanted to do is wipe out every Jew. And Christians sometimes are not really tuned into the story of Esther, don't think it really matters. But think about the fact that if Haman had been successful, we're talking in the years 465, we're talking 5th century BC, okay? This is when the story is taking place. The king who was the ruler there ruled from 485 to 465, approximately. All right, BC, before Jesus was born. If all the Jews had been wiped out, there would have been no Jews. Jesus couldn't have been born as a Jew to fulfill the biblical prophecies, all the biblical prophecies about his birth. So what Christians need to understand is on the spiritual level, what is going on, that from all the way back, and I can go back into more of the history with the Amalekites too, if you want to go back further, but if you just want to focus on Persia, go back to the story of Esther, understand that Haman's hatred of the Jewish people there's a spiritual source that goes all the way back to Exodus with the Amalekites. And so what we're dealing with in Persia is this spirit of the Amalekites. There's no Amalekite people anymore that we know of, but there's a spirit of this people who hates Jews so much that they want to wipe them out. And that's what we're dealing with. There's also the prince of the power of Persia. We know that there's a strong demonic principality in charge of Persia, who Daniel had to battle. In Daniel 10, it took 3 weeks to get an answer, and it took archangels, Michael, to break through the spiritual battle that was preventing the answer to Daniel's prayers in Daniel 10. And so that spirit of the power of the principality over Persia is what is governing still in Iran. And then there's this an Amalekite spirit, which is violence, which is full of violence against the Jewish people. So that's what we're dealing with. And there's no coincidence that it's modern day Iran that is the one saying, we are going to wipe Israel off the map. And they are funding all these terrorist organizations surrounding Israel for that purpose.
Would you care to speak further on that subject eschatologically? Why do the Jews have to be wiped out?
They have to be wiped out because Satan hates them, because Satan hates God. God said these people, the Jewish people, are the apple of his eye. The apple of your eye is the most important part. It's the pupil. It's the most sensitive part. When anyone touches the Jewish people, they're poking God in the eye. So this is fundamentally at the root. It's rebellion towards God, to hate the people who God chose. And I have to say, the Jewish people are no more loved by God than anybody else. God loves everybody equally. God just happened to make a choice. He made this choice to choose this people to represent him on earth, they're called to be a light to the world. And through these people, salvation would come. Jesus was to be born a Jew. And so the rebellion towards God that was initiated by Satan falling from heaven, because he decided he was going to make himself as God, when that rebellion is the root of the hatred of the Jews. The Jewish people have to be wiped out to thwart God's purposes. Before Jesus was born, there were efforts to wipe out the Jewish people, such as the attempted genocide in Esther. That would have thwarted Jesus being born as a Jew to fulfill those prophecies. Now, the enemy is fighting like crazy to prevent the Jewish people from being in the land, because eschatologically we know Jesus is coming back. When Jesus comes back, he's not coming back to Scotland or Washington, D.C. or York or anywhere. It's very clear he's coming back. His feet will land on the Mount of Olives in Jerusalem. It's a physical place. It's in Jerusalem. And the Jewish people are in the land, because all of the prophetic word shows us that the Jewish people are going to be the ones there when he comes back. So that's why, from the enemy's perspective, to prevent that, we have to get all the Jews out of the land. So that's what's going on spiritually, eschatologically.
Now, let's just go back again a little bit to what's happening right now. I know there's probably a certain amount that you can't share with us, but what, in your understanding, is the state of play at the moment?
First of all, on the spiritual level, we are dealing with tremendous spirits of deception. And Jesus said in Matthew 24, in the context of talking about everything that would be going on in the end times, and now every generation since Jesus has thought they were in the end times, but we can say that we know we're closer than they were anyway. And we are certainly involved in, there are horrible things going on. And we are to be expecting the return of Jesus at any moment. That's how we are to live. So we are to have that expectancy. And Jesus said, in describing what would happen in the end times, that even the very elect would be deceived. And I tell you with a broken heart, I can't tell you the number of Christians I've talked to in the last couple of weeks who are deceived. People who should understand, people who should have discernment because they know the Lord, they're being deceived. And in reference to what you said about stories and reports that are being circulated, there's all kinds of deception out there. And you're absolutely right that we should not publicize them, and we should not even believe them, because, as you said, nobody like us knows everything that's going on. But one thing I know is that the enemy will use anything and everything to demonize Israel, to demonize the Jewish people. And if there's anything that can be said to even demonize the leaders of Israel now, as they're in the midst of leading this country through this horrible tragedy, that will be done. And Christians have no business believing it or being a part of it. So I will say that. As far as a hostage being released and saying they treated her well, there is no reason that anybody should believe that they would treat any hostage well after what we've seen through their own videos and their own testimonies of hostages who have been captured. And I have seen the videos of, not the hostages, the terrorists who have been captured. I've seen the videos of them being interrogated and what they said they were told to do and what they did. So there's no humanity in that. And it is too nice to call them animals. They're not, animals don't do this kind of thing to other members of their own species. These are not animals. This is demonic activity. In fact, they were on drugs. They're given a drug to make them even more violent, to do these attacks. These are not animals. These are terrorists, demonically inspired and demonically empowered. We have to understand this, that this is not normal human behavior. All right. So when we have testimony, we have video of all the atrocities that have been done, there's no reason to believe that they are treating any hostage with any kindness. Why someone would say that when they come out? Maybe they were threatened. The woman who said that has a husband still there. They're probably, they're being told, this is what you have to say, or we're going to do whatever, or, we're going to do this to your husband or whatever. It's nothing like that is beyond the realm of imagination, because we already know how they act. So that would be my best guess as to why they would say that. I guarantee they weren't treated well.
From the Jewish perspective, historically, biblically, how are they looking on it? I mean, it's obvious. They're attacked. Is there a mandate in the Tanakh, in the Old Testament, before Jesus Christ, before Yeshua, is there a mandate for them to defend themselves, to strike back?
There is. Let's go back to the Amalekites. And this is going to sound horrible, but go back to the Amalekites, who, remember, Haman was descended from the Amalekites. But go back to Exodus, when the Israelites were in the wilderness, right after they had gotten out of Egypt, they're on their way to the promised land. A people group named the Amalekites attacked them from the rear. It's very explicit in Exodus and Deuteronomy. They attacked them from the rear. They attacked the women and the children from the rear. They attacked the weak. That is exactly what happened. And that's why I'm talking about what we're dealing with here is the spirit of Amalek, because that's exactly what Hamas just did 2 weeks ago. They targeted the women and the children. They were told on the dead bodies of terrorists that the IDF found, they found manuals instructing them what to do, how to do it. And the instructions were there to target families, women, and children. This is just totally demonic. And what they've done to women and children is, like you said, getting beheaded would be the best thing that could happen to you. So in the Bible, God tells the Jewish people to not forget. And he tells them in Moses, when Moses is talking to them in Deuteronomy, through Moses, God says that he is going to remove them from the land, and that they are not to forget. They are instructed generation after generation to not forget what Amalek did to them. And the rabbis teach that there is an Amalek in every generation. They viewed that, they considered Haman, an Amalekite, Hitler, and now Hamas. This is how they view it. They understand, Jews are very, very, very aware of their history. They understand that in every generation, they have had pogroms, they have had persecution, the Holocaust being the worst, but certainly not the first. And they understand that there are forces that are out to destroy the Jewish people. Now, I agree, there are civilians trapped in Gaza who don't like Hamas. They are victims there. They are trapped there. Israel told them to evacuate. Hamas told them not to evacuate, that this was just, propaganda from from Israel. It was scare tactics. And they actually have killed people who were trying to escape. They've killed their own people who were trying to escape. They've stolen their cars so that they couldn't drive their cars. I saw people being shot into a pit in Hamas, shooting Gazan civilians who wanted to escape, shooting them and their bodies falling into a pit and the bodies piling up in a pit. That's what's going on to civilians in Gaza who don't like Hamas. So yes, there are civilians at risk, but what is Israel supposed to do? Is Israel just supposed to stop and let this organization stay in existence who's just going to plan the next attack? Israel has, and they've stated this, they have to get rid of Hamas. This is war, and unfortunately there are casualties. In war, there will be civilians who don't want to be there, who are killed or injured. That's what's going to happen, and it's tragic. But can Israel not take out this terrorist organization that has just done this? They've showed their true colors. They're just going to do it again if Israel doesn't neutralize them.
Thank you, Tricia. And these are just facts. So I don't know any nation on earth that would not respond likewise. Israel is unusual in as much as because of they know how hated they are. This incredible spiritual, weird hatred of the Jews that's never made sense to any right-thinking person, and therefore they've always gone the extra mile to be seen, to be sure, to be absolutely seen, not to target hospitals and not to target civilians where they can help it. And of course, the terrorists, knowing that, they use these human shields. They take them down. In fact, that hostage that was released today, she said she was taken down to the tunnels. They were like a spider's web. And the Israelis know about these tunnels under what do you do with tunnels that run under a city, as it were? Anyway, so there's all of that now. So thank you for giving us some information that we don't normally get on the everyday media. So how do we approach this as Christians? Because we have a dichotomy. And we know that there are some Christians in amongst them, of course. They're not all Jewish. There's many atheists. There'll be Muslims. There are all kinds of people of different faiths caught up in this. Our faith is different to just about any other one because we're told to turn the other cheek when we are attacked and so on. Now, we don't have the time for an in-depth discussion on this, and it's possibly something I'll pick up with the discussion panel. We've got a number of pastors and scholars that come in here because there's a time and a place for everything. So, so putting that aside at the moment, how should we be praying? What else can we do? What is your advice to the Christian? Tricia, use this platform, please. What can Christians do? And I'm talking about Bible-believing Christians, people who are walking with the Lord.
Christians need to understand the spiritual dimension of this, because like you said, this eternal, this ongoing hatred of the Jews makes no sense otherwise. It does not make any sense in the natural. No excuses that have ever been used to persecute the Jews make any sense. They've been lies in the past. The only thing that makes any sense of this is the spiritual side of it. Christians must be spiritually minded. They must understand. Let me read a little bit of Exodus 17, 8 through 16 is where the Israelites had the battle with the Amalekites. Okay, and in verses 14 to 15, Moses said, hands were lifted up against the throne of the Lord. Okay, he said he's talking about the battle with the Amalekites that they just had, and he built an altar after the battle was over. And he said, because hands were lifted up against the throne of the Lord will be at war against the Amalekites from generation to generation. Hands were lifted up against the Lord. That goes back to what I was saying about if you want to be in disobedience to God, in rebellion to God, poke God in the eye, you hate the Jewish people. And that's what's going on. So first of all, Christians need to understand the spiritual dynamics of what's going on here. And then in Deuteronomy, when Moses was talking, he said the Amalekites attacked all who were lagging behind because they had no fear of God. So we are dealing with an enemy. Israel is dealing with an enemy with no fear of God, who is in disobedience, a rebellion towards God. All right. And then we're told, Paul tells us, we don't wrestle against flesh and blood. We wrestle against principalities and powers. So our battle is spiritual. Our battle is spiritual. For Christians, we need to be standing together in agreement and tearing down these strongholds. The spirit of Amalek, which Moses said, the Lord is at war against the Amalekites from generation to generation. We should be on the Lord's side and join in that battle. The Lord's at war with the Amalekites. Now, there's no physical Amalekites anymore, but anyone who acts like the Amalekites did is operating under the spirit of Amalek, such as what Hamas just did, what Hitler did, etc. We are at war. It's a spiritual battle against the spirit of Amalek that wants to destroy especially the women and children. There's at least 30. We don't really know the number of hostages. It keeps growing, but there's at least 30 children, little children, including babies. I mean, I can't even imagine what they're experiencing who are hostages right now. And what was done to little children I don't even want to talk about it. So we are at war. in a spiritual battle with the spirit of Amalek, and also with the spirit of the power of the Prince of Persia, who is behind this, who's governing Iran. So know that we're at war, battle against these principalities in praying for Israel, in praying for security for Israel. Second, realize there are strong spirits of deception unleashed in the spirit now. And we have got to draw closer and closer to the Lord and pray for discernment to not be deceived, there's stories of all kinds floating around. You cannot believe everything you see. You cannot believe everything you hear. You must pray and discern and ask the Lord to show you what is true. And the third thing is you must be a friend to the Jewish people. The Jewish people are not okay through this around in the diaspora. There is no Jew in the world who is not totally traumatized by what has happened, because it brings back the memories of everything they've gone through for centuries and centuries. And they are not okay. And they are being threatened on the streets of our Western countries. They are in danger. They are in physical danger here and now. So you must be a friend of the Jewish people. If you don't know any, find some. Go to a synagogue, let the Jewish people know that you love them, that you care for them, and that you're here to help them and stand with them in any way. And then fourth, take action, speak out against anything anti-Semitic you see or hear. Anti-Semitism is rising astronomically in just the 2 weeks since the war started. Anti-Semitism is through the roof. Jewish students on campuses are being physically attacked. On and on. I hope you've seen the demonstrations on the streets of our cities by Hamas supporters, demonstrations of thousands and thousands of people on the streets of the United States and other countries shouting to free Palestine. This is not about freeing Palestine. This is about eliminating Israel. Anyone who supports Hamas is supporting an organization that is intent on killing Jews. So just start with those things. Number one, pray. You have to hear from God. You have to understand the spiritual battle. Pray and stand with the Jewish people.
Tricia, thank you so much for your time, and just for being even-handed and for explaining the spiritual aspects of this. And I dearly hope that you'll come back and spend some more time with us. Tricia, I will say for those of you who are prayer partners and who understand the importance of intercessory prayer, I'm talking real praying people, please, as the Lord leads, you've now met Tricia online, keep her in your prayers as the Lord leads, and her organization. Those of us who are involved in the media, sometimes we are seeing things that others are not seeing, and as I say, you can't unsee them. We can become hardened by it. I think this maybe kind of happened to me a wee bit in one way, but all I'm saying is this is a real battle, and you take part in it on your knees. Okay, dear ones. So please feel free to write into us, info@globalvision.tv if you've got any questions. Thank you, Tricia, and really appreciate you taking the time, and I know how busy you are, and we'll look forward to seeing you again. I'd like to say under happier circumstances. However, let's just see how the Lord leads. So thank you again. God bless. Thank you, viewers, for watching. Bye-bye just now.
This is GV247.tv, bringing biblical perspective to the world in which you live. A powerful free resource with hundreds of short films on a wide range of Bible topics from experts around the world, plus full-length sermons and programs for teaching and encouragement. Choose from current affairs, signs of the times, a chance to voice your own opinion, and special offers on our full-length feature films, documentaries, and study materials. At over 4 hours in length, the Lamplight Project is a systematic 12-part Bible study series, a powerful teaching tool that begins with the origins of life and takes the viewer on a comprehensive journey packed with high-profile interviews, film, graphics, and illustrations. concluding with the return of Christ and an encouragement to stand firm and be faithful. Complete with a free study guide download for both personal and group study, this powerful interactive guide connects to over 1,000 programs with expert interviews on gv247.tv, our free service web TV channel. Does My Life Have Meaning? A powerful 1-hour presentation produced from the Lamplight Project. With a free copy of the Gospel of Luke, this film is crammed with engaging interviews, film and graphics, a life-challenging film to those searching for answers. As distributors for the Jesus film, we offer this timeless movie based on Luke's Gospel. This clear presentation of the life of Jesus Christ has been viewed worldwide and translated into over 1,200 languages. We provide the film with a free copy of the Gospel of Luke. The Daniel Project is a popular TV documentary that presents an overview of Bible prophecy and an encouragement to read the signs of the times. Hailed as one of the best TV films to be made on the subject, DVD extras feature a heart-to-heart interview about the way of rescue. Based loosely on the documentary, The Daniel Connection is a full-length feature film. This fictional thriller incorporates many of the themes promoted through pop culture and social media which affect people on a global scale. Launched at the Cannes Film Festival, The Daniel Connection points the ever-skeptical viewer to search the Bible for answers to life's deepest questions. We've been serving the body of Christ for over 30 years, and if you would like further information, please do not hesitate to get in touch.